Alright, today we have the HP Omen 14. So the HP Omen 14 is part of their Transcend line, which is trying to be a little more premium than the typical Omen laptop, and at a higher cost too, unfortunately. This one has an Intel Core Ultra 9 185H CPU and then the NVIDIA RTX 4070 GPU running at an extremely low 65 watts, which I'll talk about the implications of that later. Now you might have noticed a slight change in my setup here. I have a really cool new L-shaped desk here from FlexiSpot, which is today's sponsor. Check it out. This is the FlexiSpot E2L L-shaped standing desk. The one I have here is the 71 by 63. You know, I just wanted the largest one they could get because, come on, I review laptops. But they have a lot of variety and options and colors. The legs, first of all, are super sturdy and it gives you plenty of legroom underneath the desk. Of course, I had to keep the all white setup going with the white model here, but you know, it looks really cool. Super clean. It's nice and thick enough to where you can mount pretty much anything underneath it. It's sturdy and give me just plenty of space for reviewing multiple laptops. So you've got these controls right here, which are super easy to use. You know, you've even got your little standing guy to show you that it's standing and your sitting one to show you that it's sitting. Come on. It can't get much easier than that. And you can set those to whatever height you want. So that's 4 presets in total with a really smooth and quiet operation. I can even be sitting on this thing and it goes up and down like flawlessly, like there's nothing on it. It was surprisingly easy to put together too. I'd recommend if you get it, pay attention to the drill holes on this thing because they pretty much guide you on where everything needs to go. Of course, in accordance with the manual too. And what's a new desk and a new house without a new chair as well, okay? So this is the FlexiSpot OC1, and let me tell you why this thing is cool, all right? So first of all, hello, it folds, all right? So you can actually fold this thing down, slide it under your desk, get it out of the way of your cats from, you know, messing it up, laying in it, putting their fur all in it. That's something that my pets have a really bad habit of with my chairs, was laying in them, and with me being slightly allergic, that's not always the greatest thing. You can choose from a standard mesh for more airflow or a cushion option like I have here, which I think is super comfy. The headrest can move in a variety of positions, same with the armrests, and you have an adjustable lumbar, seat height. Of course, it can go back as well with a footrest. I mean, come on. Between that, the ergonomic design, the memory foam cushion, like it's a solid chair and it looks cool too. So if you're interested, I'll have links in the description and the pinned comment on where you can pick one of these guys up. Get yourself one of these bad boys right now while they're doing their spring sale and give yourself a nice little upgrade to that office or gaming space. Anyways, thanks FlexiSpot for sponsoring this. Now back to the video. So this thing has a really nice black metal chassis that is unfortunately terrible for picking up fingerprints, but still overall it looks great and it feels extremely premium. I wouldn't say the build quality is quite as good as Razer or like the 2024 Zephyrus G14, but very close and it's miles better than any Omen I've ever used before. And it doesn't scream gamer. That is until you see the keyboard. It's got 4-zone RGB and these rather odd outlined keys that I'm personally not a huge fan of, but I know a lot of people do like this. It reminds me of keyboards from like the early 2000s and 90s, although it does allow the keycaps to be pretty large for such a small laptop, and it feels pretty good to type on with a decent travel distance, although not quite as deep feeling as the G14. Here's a sound sample. And because I got it from someone else, they had worn out the trackpad a little bit, which I find concerning how a trackpad could get worn out this quickly on a fairly new laptop, but maybe that was just the previous owner. It is most definitely a plastic trackpad and not glass, so I gotta knock some points off there. I feel like any laptop over $1,000 at this point should at least have a glass trackpad, especially the more portable options like these. Overall, it's a good design. I like the look. I just don't like that it's bigger and heavier than the G14 while offering less power. Like, make that make sense. And it's even got a little booty to it. I mean, that's not my favorite thing that laptops do. And usually it means that you'll get better thermals or more power, but that's not the case here. Well, not quite, but I'll explain why later. So yeah, I'd say I preferred the look over the G14 and the Blade 14 over this one, but still, it is a huge leap forward for HP, and I hope they continue fine-tuning this design language, as we've already seen with like the Omen Max 16, and hopefully when they release the 2025 model of this, that Hopefully it looks about the same. Maybe it'll offer more power. We'll see. The display, it's a super glossy OLED 120 Hz 1800p display. So a little bit more pixel resolution than QHD. Keep in mind, this is the exact same panel that you get on the G14 and quite a few other 14-inch laptops now that are rocking OLED panels, which I reviewed here if you want to check that out for more detail. But it's nice. I mean, it's actually glossier and more reflective than the G14s. Seems like the G14 and the G16 both have a stronger anti-reflective coating than this guy, but it still looks amazing. And some people might even prefer this one having the more reflective coating because like it is truly glossy to the max. Although I found it weird how much thicker the lid is compared to the G14 with the exact same display. Like it seems a little excessive that they have the lid this thick, but I mean, not a huge deal. So it's 120 Hz, full 100% DCI-P3 color gamut, S-stripe subpixel layout, same as the G14s, which is a good subpixel layout for text clarity and the best for burn-in prevention. You got perfect OLED contrast, near perfect response time, amazing motion clarity, and let me tell you that 120 Hz on OLED to me feels like as smooth, if not smoother, than 240 Hz on an IPS display because of that extra motion clarity. Like I really like it. This one also supports Windows Dynamic Refresh Rate, which I haven't really seen on a gaming laptop until this one. Basically, this helps save battery by letting Windows adjust the refresh rate between 60 Hz and 120 Hz, and as low as 48 Hz. But unlike the G14 with the same panel, this one for some reason didn't come with G-Sync, which I thought was super weird, and for me that's kind of a turnoff for a gaming laptop in 2024, and definitely 2025. So hopefully the 2025 model does have G-Sync, but we'll see. I'll update the comments below if that happens, and of course I'm going to try to get a review unit of that as well. Another turnoff with this panel is the native 1800p resolution. I mean, that's just a little too high of a resolution for 14-inch. Like, you will not notice the difference, the extra resolution between 1600p, like the regular QHD 16:10, and this, which is 1800p. Like, on a 14-inch display, you're not going to notice that difference. I also talked about this in the G14 video, but again, like this resolution will tank your FPS in some games if you don't watch out. So the first thing you're going to want to do anytime you load up a game on this is just change that resolution to 1600p. Trust me, you will not notice the difference, but you will notice the extra FPS. I mean, you could even go as low as 1200p and still be fine on these because, again, it's a 14-inch display. 1800p is just too many extra pixels for this GPU. As you can see in the charts here, like, you can get a lot more FPS just by that slight bump in resolution. So anyways, brightness is also pretty good at a little over 400 nits, and I didn't find it to be too dim, although you might if you're coming from something like a HDR 1000, you know, mini LED display or something like that. All right, so as for the CPU, I'm going to show some benchmarks here. The Intel Core Ultra 185H wasn't really held back at all in this chassis, which I kind of found surprising considering how far they held back the NVIDIA GPU in this chassis. It's like they prioritized the CPU for some reason over the GPU, but you know, whatever. So yeah, your CPU can hit 75 watts, which is about where the cutoff starts to happen anyways for gaming performance on this chip. So that gives you some really good performance. We're getting like really good Cinebench R23 scores here. And because this is one of Intel's most efficient chips for gaming laptops, you'll find it also performs really well when it's limited in wattage, whether that be balance mode at 45 watts, scoring nearly 15,000 still, or silent mode at 30 watts, scoring almost 11,000 still. That's crazy. And battery, which for some reason gets the same wattage and score as balance mode plugged in. So very good performance there across the board. One thing to note is that silent mode absolutely tanks single core performance on this guy. So I would only use silent mode when you really have to. Also, core-to-core latency was looking pretty good, so no complaints there. I do want to take a look at the power scaling graph for CPUs real quick. So this just shows you how much performance you get for your wattage with your CPU. And that's kind of where the Omen 14 is nice, is because yes, while it's not as good as the latest Ryzen processors, which are just amazing at efficiency, it does fall pretty well in line with at least like the Ryzen 9 7940HS and the 8945HS. You know, this orange line here is pretty much in line with those guys. So you're getting way more efficiency than you used to get from Intel, which is the white line, and like the HX chips, which is the blue and green lines here. So basically the further left and higher that the line goes shows you that you're getting more performance at lower wattages, which is what you want to see in a laptop. In order for it to not have to use as much wattage and to run cooler and quieter, that's the sweet spot. You know, more battery life, more performance on battery. That's what we like to see, and that Intel Ultra 9 185H does a very good job there. All right, so battery life. The Intel Core Ultra chip, like I said, contrary to people's popular opinions on Intel battery life and efficiency, this is actually really good in the battery department. Like, this laptop did amazingly here with its 71 watt hour battery, which is pretty low, mind you. So you're still getting about 7 hours of YouTube playback, which is about the equivalent of, you know, doing basic tasks, browsing the web, checking emails, stuff like that. And I'd be willing to bet you could easily, if you brought down the refresh rate to like 48 hertz, you could probably pump out about 8 or 9 hours out of this guy. However, I must say that Intel needs to work on their drivers for this CPU. I noticed this myself and with quite a few other people that I've chatted with who own, you know, various Intel Core Ultra laptops, not just this one. At some point, a lot of people have experienced issues with lag and choppy video playback on battery with these chips. It's not exclusive to this laptop. It's just something that Intel needs to work on a little bit with driver updates. Although I found that from looking at like online forums and stuff that people have had much smoother operation on battery with some of the more recent drivers they put out. So they might have well fixed that issue by now. Now, internally, this is a pretty basic laptop. You got 2 fans, 1 swappable SSD with decent speeds, and soldered RAM. Not a huge deal breaker for me. I think the soldered RAM isn't terrible because it comes with 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5X, which is super fast, low latency RAM, extremely low failure rate, and it's highly efficient. So that gives you more battery life, it's less space on the motherboard, so that you can actually have gaming laptops that are this compact. Like, we didn't really see that until LPDDR5X kind of hit the market. Although myself, I'm personally eagerly awaiting the arrival of LP Cam 2, which can be swapped out and gives you those soldered benefits as well. But that might be like a 2026 thing at this point. This guy also has a vapor chamber, which is really cool and definitely helps those thermals out. Now, the ports are interesting here. You have this rear USB-C port, and that's actually where you charge the laptop. It uses power delivery 3.1 exclusively, and they give you a oddly large 140 watt USB-C charger. It's a real shame that it's this huge when you have other 140 watt USB-C adapters that are so small that they plug into the wall. Yeah, I mean, still cool to see this regardless. This port is also 10 gigabits per second with DisplayPort 1.4. You also get an HDMI 2.1 port on the back here, which is the only one that connects directly to the NVIDIA graphics. And that's unfortunate because I haven't mentioned this yet, but this laptop has no mux switch. This is actually the only way to get a direct connection to the GPU and get G-Sync on your monitor that you're plugging it into if it supports that. On the left side, we have Thunderbolt 4 with 100 watts power delivery and a display out connected to Optimus and a headphone audio combo jack. And then on the right side is 2 USB-A Gen 2 ports. I'm really liking this trend lately of not having any side vents on these newer gaming laptops. I think it looks really nice, it looks sleek, and it keeps the ports higher up so that they're out of the way of, like, you know, your mouse hand and you're not getting hot air blown on your mouse hand. Pretty cool. Now, the speakers are just okay here. They're not great. You'll see in this test here, I had AI produce a song off of some lyrics that I wrote to highlight the sound differences. You'll see it just kind of gets blown away by the Zephyrus G14 here, which has the same speaker setup as the Zephyrus G14. So here's a sound sample.
Laptop speaker test. Laptop speakers. Getting better every year. These laptop speakers sound so loud and clear. Can you hear the noise? Did your eardrums get destroyed by these laptop speakers? Yeah, they're playing for you.
Now, fan noise was a bit weird for me because I had heard that this was a pretty quiet laptop, but I didn't really find that to be the case outside of a few scenarios. But yeah, I'll play some sound samples here, but you'll see that it's pretty much in line with other gaming laptops. So I think the fan noise part really comes into show when you actually compare it with how the graphical output is. That's why I have this fan noise to time spy graphics ratio chart, because it really highlights, okay, like maybe the fans are a little bit quieter than some laptops, but are you actually getting sufficient performance output from those fans? And that's where I think the HP Omen kind of falls behind if you look at this graph here. So it's separated by turbo, balance mode, and then silent mode. The light blue bars are the actual fan noise in decibels, and the dark dark blue bars are your graphics score and time spy divided by the fan noise. So this is your graphics output for each decibel of fan noise that you get. So you want to see a lower number on the light blue bars and you want to see a higher number on the dark blue bars. Obviously there's going to be a bias because higher GPUs are going to score higher naturally here. But even if we're comparing this to other 4070s, look how much lower this is. It's almost like the 3070 Ti here in the 2022 Zephyrus G14 for how much performance you get per decibel, at least in turbo mode. And then same thing when you drop it down to balanced, it actually falls behind a 3070 Ti here in the fan noise per decibel at 47 decibels and 180 points per decibel. Silent mode is a little better. You're getting 192 points per decibel here at 35.5 decibels. Not terrible, but again, still behind most 4070 laptops. And that's really just because of that 65 watt limit. So I'm going to mention here in a second how you can actually improve this. Just keep watching. Stay tuned for that. The good thing though is that at least in the HP Omen software, you get pretty solid control of the fans. So if you want to turn those down, you can, and the thermals have enough headroom to where you can do that pretty comfortably. So the thermals on this bad boy are not bad at all, actually. Like, I was genuinely shocked that HP did this good of a job on thermals for a 14-inch laptop that isn't like blazing those fans at the highest RPM. We're talking like most Omen laptops before had pretty loud fans unless you had manually turned them down. So it was cool to see temperatures that were better than the G14, which is really cool. I mean, of course, these are running at a much lower wattage than the G14s. Unfortunately, I can't give it too much credit there because, again, if we were matching watt for watt, it's probably going to be about the same, if not more. But we'll get back to that. So I like to use control here to showcase thermals because this is a solid game for just pushing, either the GPU or CPU to the max. And it's very consistent with like not many jumps in performance or anything like that. It just gives you a nice constant load to work with. So I'm going to give you an example of GPU bound and CPU bound games because, thermals can vary a lot between those two types of games. So we're just going to change settings here in control to simulate that. So GPU bound in turbo mode, you're looking at, 64 watts going to the GPU, about 28 to 30 watts on the CPU. And I mean, it's running cool as a cucumber. Like, this thing is 60 degrees on the GPU and 71 on the CPU. Like, this is crazy cool. It's like there's so much thermal headroom here, and you'll see in a second, I actually end up giving the GPU more wattage because HP is holding a lot back on this laptop. You have other laptops, when they're at like 30 watts on the CPU, they're hitting like 80 to 90 degrees. Even like the G16 can sometimes do that. And on the GPU, they're hitting like 85 degrees, but of course these laptops are pushing their GPUs to like 90 to 100 watts. So 65 watts is just so crazy low here. So yeah, it makes the thermals look like they're like god tier, but really this is like if you had like the G14, for example, in its balance mode, but you had the fans on turbo mode. It's kind of like the equivalent of what we're getting here. Now, if you're playing a game that's GPU bound in balance mode, you're looking at about 40 watts on the GPU and like 20 to 25 watts on the CPU. Again, it's running extremely cold, 60s on the CPU, 50s on the GPU. Like, this is crazy. That's again, like the fans are a little bit too loud for, the performance output here. The fans could be tamed a lot more. Again, you can manually control those fans if you want. So you could comfortably run this like probably half the fan noise I have here and still be getting pretty great temps. Now, if you're in silent mode on a GPU bound game, performance does drop quite a bit. The GPU is only running at 35 watts now, which is really not going to sustain that much of a game unless you're running at extremely low settings. CPU 19 watts, which isn't bad for this chip, but the temps, again, 50s on the GPU, 60s on the CPU. So much headroom, it's not even funny. Now I'm switching to CPU bound settings, which is going to be, 1200p, low settings. Think about games like Valorant or Counter-Strike. Sometimes Call of Duty or Cyberpunk can have CPU bound moments as well. So in silent mode here, we're running at it's about the same as it is GPU bound, just a little bit more CPU wattage. So 35 watts to the GPU, 23 watts to the CPU. So I recommend if you're playing games on this laptop in silent mode, try to get the settings as CPU bound as possible because the temps are honestly great here. Balance mode, when you're CPU bound, you're looking at about like 39 to 45 watts on the GPU, about the same as it was on GPU bound games, and about 20 or so watts on the CPU. Again, performance not terrible, not amazing, but temperatures are great. Turbo mode, CPU bound, it's still hitting that maximum 65 watts on the GPU, regardless of whether you're GPU bound or CPU bound here. It looks like CPU is hitting like 30 watts. So this is like really the only time I see the CPU temperatures go higher outside of like loading screens. Yes, in loading screens, you're going to see that CPU hit like 95 degrees because it's running at like, 50 or more watts. But in games, 30 watts or so, you're looking at mid to high 70s and then mid to high 60s on the GPU. So again, so much thermal headroom. The fans could come down, the wattage could go up. A lot of tweaks to be had here. Now, some games might even be more CPU bound than this. I tried to, do windowed mode and DLSS and get it even more CPU bound. And really all that did was just drop the GPU wattage, and the CPU wattage went up to about 45 watts. We did push 80s at this point, but I mean, hey, like that's going to be pretty rare. This is like almost simulating a loading screen at this point. I feel like most of the time your GPU will get called for a little bit more than 30 watts. Keyboard temperatures are also really good. If you're on battery and silent mode, just browsing, you're getting about like 30 degrees in the center, 29 or so, mid 20s on the sides of the keyboard. If you're gaming in silent mode, it gets a bit warmer, like 35 to 40 in the center, but still like mid to high 20s on the sides. Gaming in balance mode, you're looking at, again, around 36, 37 in the center, mid 20s on the sides. And then turbo mode gaming, this is where it gets the hottest it will be, which is about 39, 40 in the center, and then mid to high 20s on the sides. So overall, not too bad, fairly comfortable, especially where your hands will be most of the time. All right, now as far as software goes, this is the Omen Gaming Hub is what they call it right now. This is, it's very like in your face with pictures and ads and stuff like that. Although you do have a nice little sidebar tool that you can pull up here for those of you who like to just change things without using hotkeys. There's a bunch of like just random tabs that I don't think are really necessary. You've got like a gallery of screenshots and RAM optimizer, computer cleaners, like all that sort of stuff. You don't really need any of this, just to be honest with you. But webcam enhancer, which I didn't really think did anything. It says these funny little gamer sentences here when you're opening the software, but really majority of the time you're going to be just clicking on your laptop and opening basically the control panel for your fans and stuff like that. So the performance control tab is really where pretty much everything in the software lies. This is basically where you need to be. So it has your fan modes at the top, eco mode, balance, and performance. In eco mode, you're locked out of fan speeds because, it's trying to minimize fans to the lowest they can go. Balance mode, you do have some options. You can either max the fans out, have it on automatic, which tries to give you like a balance of not being too loud, or you can manually adjust the fans in here, which is actually pretty nice. It does a really good job. You can set it to just be dynamically low, or you can adjust the fan curve how you please. The only bad thing here though is that the fan curve applies to balanced and performance mode, so you can't actually set up separate fan curves, which was kind of annoying. So it's like they almost got this perfect, but I still got to give them props. It's really cool to see an in-between option where it's like dynamically low or dynamically high with your target fan curve as well. And then performance mode, again, like I said, same thing with the fan curves. It applies the same one that you had with balance mode. It just locks you out of that low setting. And same thing if you had max fans applied in performance, it's going to be the same in balance mode until you go in here and change it. Performance mode has a special setting here where it has advanced settings. So that gives you that extra 15 watts to the GPU. And that's actually really easy to miss. Like it looks like it's just like information text. So I feel like a lot of reviewers miss this part. Otherwise, this thing is running at 50 watts only on that GPU if you miss this setting. So that is crucial that you find this setting, because otherwise like you're not getting the full performance out of this machine. So make sure that that's toggled on, set it all the way to 15 watts. And then they have a maximum battery drain setting because for some reason they think that this laptop is going to drain the battery if you have more than 50 watts going to the GPU. It's not. Like I never experienced any battery drain even when I had this set all the way to 40%. It always stayed at 100% even under high loads. Lighting, they give you basic controls or more advanced controls here. Lots of fun little options that you can do between the 4-zone lighting. I believe this laptop also comes with a per key or a 1-zone if you buy it from HP directly. This is the Best Buy model, which has a 4-zone keyboard. Now the graphics switcher is pretty important here. So this is where you go. You can choose between hybrid mode or integrated graphics only. So again, this doesn't have a mux switch. So usually you would have like a NVIDIA GPU only mode section here, but that's not available because I think they just figured Optimus was just easier to run on this laptop. That might change for 2025, but at least in 2024, this laptop has Optimus, or it just has basically your eco mode, which is integrated graphics only, that disables the NVIDIA GPU and gives you, maximum battery life. Normally not having a mux switch can hold back some performance, but there's been a lot of Windows improvements through Caso and other things like that, and it's pretty much the same now as running NVIDIA GPU only. They probably wanted to eliminate some of the headaches that you can get with Advanced Optimus or rebooting to get into NVIDIA GPU mode, so I can't really fully blame HP for that. A lot of people think their laptop's broken or something because it flickers for a second when it's switching games, so I get it, whatever. Power options, you have dynamic refresh rate, which you can enable here. This is pretty nice. This allows you to go as low as 48 hertz when it's on battery, depending on what you have open. So Windows can dynamically adjust your refresh rate and maximize your battery life. And then lastly, you have key assignments where you can assign keys to do certain actions here. Other than that, I do recommend going to the Help and Resources tab, looking up your software and drivers for your laptop, just in case it doesn't update them automatically. I like to just go in here, search up the model. It'll pull up the model that you have automatically. You just tell it which version of Windows you're running, and then it'll show you the latest drivers. And that's about it for the Omen Gaming Hub software. Overall, I think it's pretty clean. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but you get a decent amount of control, and it's fairly user-friendly. I'm quickly going through the BIOS here. You don't have many options in the BIOS, but you can at least disable virtualization. That's what you would need to do if you're gonna run a VBIOS swap on here. I also tried the third-party software that someone had made for the Omen, I think it's called Omen Mon. Didn't work super well for this laptop. I don't know if it just needs to be updated, but I would highly encourage people to, maybe contribute to this creator. I'm gonna put his name here so people can maybe help this guy out. He definitely has some potential. It could be as good as G-Helper someday, hopefully. But for now, it's, it can do some of the basics, but overall I found that it was kind of buggy and it didn't quite work well with this laptop other than maybe some fan control settings. But I have to shout them out here because there's potential. I've always loved these kind of third-party programs that people have made for controlling laptop software, because a lot of us don't like to have, this resource-heavy software that comes with the laptop, and it's, it's hurting battery life, it's hard to use, the UI isn't as friendly. So stuff like this, got to give them a shout out. Hopefully this improves over time. All right, so the GPU, right? This is kind of where the bread and butter of this whole story is. And it's also where I was the most disappointed with this laptop. You've got a laptop that's a little bigger than the G14, a little heavier than the G14, and other 14-inch gaming laptops as well. Yet this one has way less wattage going to the GPU than its competitors. So the 4060 and 4070 in here only give you up to 65 watts, which you'll see in the gaming benchmarks why that's way too low for this GPU. I'm talking that's sort of like an ultrabook range. Think like a Dell XPS or something like that. That's what you would normally expect to run at this low of a wattage. So a laptop that's marketed as a gaming laptop at 65 watts is a little crazy. And not to mention, the 65 watts is only when you enable the overdrive mode in the software. So otherwise, you're running at a max of 50 watts, which is that is way under what this chip needs to run at its peak performance. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but the 40 series GPUs on the 4050, 4060, and 4070, they have a voltage limit. So anything after 100 watts is essentially pointless, and it doesn't give you any extra performance. So in 2024, that worked out really well for smaller laptops like the Blade 14 or the G14, but here we're not even getting to that 100 watt point. So it makes you kind of sad. So this RTX 4070 here at 65 watts performs more like a RTX 4060 at full wattage. And sometimes it's almost closer to a RTX 4050. So basically it's like you're getting a GPU that's one tier under what you've actually purchased. And normally I can be okay with that. If the device is indeed pushing its limits and it provides a lot of other features, like the Zephyrus G14 from Asus, for example. I've given that praise, even though the 4080, 4090 models sort of perform like they're one tier less, because it has a lot more to offer. It has a lot of portability, a lot of battery life, good speakers, display, all that stuff. And it at least gets pretty close. I mean, you can tell that the G16 didn't really leave that much on the table, but my problem with the Omen 14 here is it leaves a lot on the table. And to prove that, I installed a higher wattage VBIOS to trick the GPU into running at a higher wattage than what it's rated for. Keep in mind, the VBIOS has nothing to do with the BIOS of the laptop. It's just strictly the NVIDIA video BIOS. So it's connected to the NVIDIA chip. And if you watch my VBIOS swapping video, you'll know that this is something I like to do on most laptops that I test, just because it's fun to see what the limits actually are. But I typically advise against the risk because of thermals or, potentially bricking your laptop. So, however, with the Omen 14 here, it was actually incredibly eye-opening. This was a rare case where I was like, wait a second, this should have come from the factory like this. So I took a 120 watt VBIOS from an HP Victus and I installed it on here. Lo and behold, we're scoring much closer to what an actual RTX 4070 should be scoring. And the sucky part for consumers, the thermals are actually pretty kept in check the whole time. It ran at around 90 to 95 watts with this VBIOS, which is perfect because that's actually all you really need for an RTX 4070. I even tried a 140 watt one, just to see what happens. And it did up the wattage to around 110 to 120, but the scores barely changed. So I'd say that 120 watt VBIOS that gets you in that 90s range of wattage under load is probably the sweet spot here. But yeah, I couldn't believe my eyes. Like, we now have a laptop that is basically matching or surpassing the 2024 Zephyrus G14 in performance and total wattage output and thermals. Like, what? HP, come on. Like, running it this way could make this an actual proper Intel competitor to the G14, which we need more competition in the space. Like, I am an advocate for that. So I'm just baffled that HP missed this opportunity here and played it way too safe with this guy, because like, this thing is actually a monster in disguise. Like, to be honest, I almost skipped reviewing this laptop until I tried this out. So for those of you at home willing to take the risk, this might be worth doing. And I can say that if this was my daily driver, this is exactly how I'd run it. Now, one thing to keep in mind, like I said on the ports, is you don't have a mux switch on this laptop. So that is also going to affect the GPU a little bit. Although with these Intel Core Ultra chips, again, like how it was on the G16 and other laptops I've tried with this chip, you tend to score higher in Optimus versus when it's just the NVIDIA GPU only. And again, I've never figured out why that is, but it seems to also be the case here. I did run a couple benchmarks with the laptop hooked up to a monitor, which should theoretically give it a little more power to the GPU, a little less, eliminate some of that CPU overhead, but it's about the same, if not sometimes worse. So normally I would be pretty upset that a laptop in 2024, 2025 doesn't have a mux switch, but I'll give them credit here, with a lot of the Windows improvements like Caso, if you've seen that, and maybe just the efficiency of this Intel chip. We've gotten to a point where a mux switch isn't really a deal breaker like it used to be. Plus, I gotta say, at least keeps things a little more simple. You don't have to worry about advanced Optimus or rebooting the laptop or, stuff like that. So yeah, I can't be too mad there, honestly. All right, now creator benchmarks. So creators will most likely really appreciate this laptop with it having that OLED display and with the Intel CPU having quick sync, which can kind of give you an edge in video editing, as well as pretty good latency mon results too. So DPC latency was surprisingly good here. However, that 65 watt GPU will still hold you back a little bit, and we'll go over that in some of the benchmarks. In creative apps, it doesn't fall as far behind as it does in games. So Photoshop, for example, we're scoring pretty middle of the road, actually. We're even surpassing some RTX 4090 laptops, because this benchmark relies a lot more on the CPU than the GPU. Even in balance mode, we're pretty much the same as we were in turbo. Silent mode does fall behind a little bit, but again, not bad at all. And on battery, it's doing great. So overall, great scores in Photoshop here for such a small laptop. Premiere Pro, this is where the GPU starts to come in a little bit, and you're starting to see it pretty close to the bottom of the list. In balance mode, takes a good little hit there, and then in silent mode, at least kind of makes up for it. It actually performs better in silent mode on this benchmark than it does in balance mode, which is very strange. And that's sort of the same thing with battery too. If you're in balance mode on battery with this laptop, doesn't do super well with Premiere Pro, but then if you're in silent mode on battery, it's like boom, like right up there with these 4090 laptops. DaVinci Resolve is also pretty GPU heavy, although it does call for some CPU power as well. It doesn't quite fit the bill here. It's falling pretty far behind these other laptops, especially in balance mode. It's actually crazy. Like, this is probably the biggest gap in performance across anything else with this laptop. For some reason, balance mode and these creative programs just don't mesh well. If you're in silent mode, it just comes back. All of a sudden, we've got way less of a gap in silent mode compared to other laptops than we do in balance mode. It actually performs better in balance mode on battery for DaVinci Resolve than it does plugged in. Don't really know why, but that's just how it is. And then last, I like to run an Ableton benchmark here with just the demo track for Ableton 11, which you can download for free if you want to check this on your laptop. The first verse of this song is pretty intensive, so it's good for showing, what you'd be looking at with a lot of effects, a lot of tracks, things like that. We're looking at about a 30 to 35% CPU load here, which isn't the best. It's not bad by any means. Most laptops I get, like the higher performing ones, usually get into like the 20s at this part. So low to mid 30s is not too bad. It's just not quite as good as I'd like to see. But again, if you're a musician, it's still going to be plenty powerful for mostly everything. All right, now my gaming benchmarks, to preface this, are going to show you the stock 65 watts that this laptop comes with. If you want to get an idea of what it looks like with the VBIOS, again, I showed that earlier on the GPU section of this video, but this will at least give you an idea of what we're working with and if you'd want to go with a VBIOS swap or not. If you do, just look at the G14 and these graphs, and that's about where it will fall with that VBIOS swap. To preface the gaming benchmarks and all that, look at the Time Spy graphics score because that sort of gives you an idea of where it's going to fall in most games. It's usually going to fall above a 3060, but it's probably going to fall below a 3070 Ti. It's getting about 9857, so less than 10,000 in graphics score, which is not super great, but again, we can boost that with a VBIOS swap and get it closer to that 11,500 range that we can see at sort of the lower end of the 4070 level. In balance mode, takes a decent little hit, 8458. Now it's at the bottom of the charts, below the 3070 Ti still. And in silent mode, it at least makes up for it a little bit. With the tuning of this guy, you're hitting a little closer to other laptops now. One thing where it does shine is on USB-C power delivery. You're pretty much getting almost the same performance as you have plugged in. And with the integrated graphics, you're getting really good performance as well. If you want to just disable the GPU and just game off of this. And Steel Nomad has been replacing Time Spy lately, so I'm going to throw those scores up here as well. All right, starting with Cyberpunk on ultra settings, we've got the Omen 14 here at the bottom of the list, unfortunately. For some reason, well under even the Flow X16 with the 3070 Ti. I mean, partially that's the wattage. Also, this game's benchmark has kind of led to lower FPS results than it did like even a year ago. So if we're in balance mode, you're getting 27 FPS. So the fan noise is more than the FPS. That's why it kind of disappears there. If we're in silent mode, you're getting 24 FPS. So well under most 4070s here. If we do the ray tracing ultra preset, which enables DLSS, we're getting 42 FPS. And again, barely holding it together in balance mode and silent mode in this preset. I mean, it's still not terrible considering, that's one of the highest presets you can have in this game. Only thing above that really is the ray tracing overdrive, where it actually is scoring the same as the G14 here. Next, let's talk about Shadow of the Tomb Raider. One of my most tried and true benchmarks, has remained pretty consistent over the years. Omen 14, unfortunately, at the bottom at 88 FPS. In balance mode, still at the bottom, 74 FPS. Silent mode goes up quite a bit to 60 FPS, which not at the bottom, but still a ways down there. However, I do have to applaud the silent mode a little bit here because we have some 4090 laptops that couldn't even do that. And this is a game that is playable in 4K at 43 FPS. It's at the bottom of the list, but it could be worse. I mean, that's still very playable. And this is one I like to test on battery as well. And that's really where the Omen 14 kind of shines a bit. 72 FPS. It's now pretty much near the top of other 4070s and closing in on 4080 laptops and 4090 laptops as well. Same scenario on USB-C power delivery. You're pretty much getting the full performance out of this guy, 72 FPS. So its battery results and USB-C results are essentially the same as it is when it's plugged in. And even integrated graphics aren't too bad here. These are some of the best integrated graphics out there. So seeing it get 32 FPS at medium 1080p, hey, that's not bad. That's when the GPU is completely disabled. Moving over to Call of Duty here. I've included the 140 watt VBIOS just to give you an idea that you're pretty much almost in line with other 4070 laptops once you do that VBIOS swap. Otherwise, it's not too far behind here in this game. It's actually above the MSI Stealth 16, and it does drop back a bit in balance mode now at the bottom of the list, but still very close to the MSI Stealth 16 here at 140 watts. And you can see I have the Flow Z13 in this graph. Just wanted to sort of tease that one. So definitely make sure you're subscribed because that is an integrated GPU that is hitting that 55 FPS right there in balance mode. So that is a very cool laptop. Video coming soon, so stay tuned. Next, we've got Horizon Zero Dawn, where it actually comes out a little bit ahead of the Zephyrus G14. No idea why, but hey, that's still kind of cool to see. In 1080p, it's just barely behind the G14, but not too bad at 100 FPS. However, in balance mode, it is quite a bit farther down on this game. And in silent mode, it's pretty much still in the bottom, but at least the gap is a little closer. Red Dead Redemption 2, again, at the bottom, but within just a few FPS of the 90 watt 4070, the G14. Forza Horizon 5, 73 FPS, very playable. Again, keep in mind, this is a tiny laptop with very little wattage. Balance mode is doing all right, and then silent mode, it does have a little bit closer of a gap. Again, also tried 4K on this one, and yeah, it didn't do too well, but hey, at least you can get over 40 FPS on the highest preset of Forza Horizon 5 in 4K. I mean, at the end of the day, that's still not a bad result. Helldivers 2 had one of the biggest gaps between this one and other laptops, especially in balance mode at only 68 FPS versus 85 FPS on the G14. So this is one where you'd probably want to close that gap with a VBIOS swap if you're really wanting some higher FPS in a game like this. In Black Myth Wukong, it didn't do too bad. This is the most demanding game I have on my list. So this is, maxed out ray tracing, and we're getting, almost 30 FPS in this. Of course, you could get much higher FPS turning settings way down, which you can in this game.
Far Cry 6 was another one with a pretty big gap between this one and other 4070s. It's really unfortunate to see, especially in that balance mode. I mean, even though we're getting like 60 FPS still, it does kind of hurt to see those 4070 laptops at 85. And then lastly, Apex Legends, we're hitting 132 FPS, and the 1% lows are really good here at 89. But again, we are a pretty long ways away from these other 4070 laptops that are all in the 170s. So like I've been saying, if you really want to match those laptops, or at least get pretty close to those, you're going to want to do a VBIOS swap. As you've been seeing throughout this video, it's just kind of the same pattern. So you've got fan noise that is probably a little too loud for what it could be. You've got temps that are like incredibly low with so much thermal headroom, it's not even funny. And you've got wattage that is way too low for how much thermal headroom this laptop has. Again, this is the effect of that 65 watts. This is almost like having an ultrabook like a Dell XPS running these games, and it's just not going to come close to these other 4070 laptops that are actually hitting or almost hitting that 100 watt voltage limit. And that's even going to be more apparent if you're running at the stock 50 watt max and you don't move that advanced setting slider that I showed in the software part of the video.
All right, so my overall thoughts on the Omen 14. I love it. I think it's a huge step forward for HP. Like, it just truly makes me happy to see HP targeting a more premium sector. The Omen laptops in the past few years have always had really good value. One of my first gaming laptops ever was the Omen 15, and I loved that thing. Yes, it was mostly plastic and it had super loud fans, but at least in the US, HP gives you a lot of bang for your buck. I remember like the HP Omen 17 and Omen 16 of the past years. Some of their higher tier options have been some of the cheapest you can get, especially when they're on sale. And the good thing is HP does a lot of sales throughout the year on their website. So I'll have links to all that in the description below if you do want to check out some HP laptops. I recommend just keeping your eye out for a sale on these because you can get them way cheaper than laptops that have similar specs most of the time, at least if you wait for a sale. And yes, although the Transcend line is a little more expensive than, the typical Omen line was, you still get a lot here. I mean, you're getting, an OLED display, full metal chassis, you're getting a pretty decent keyboard if you're cool with that design, and just like an overall really sleek and stealthy look. Like, you could easily take this into the office, make the keyboard white, and people might even think you had just had like a MacBook alternative, like some Windows Ultrabook or something. Do I think it's better than some of the competitors like the Zephyrus G14 or the Blade 14? Not really. I do think those laptops take these a little step further, but although if it was 2024, I'd probably still pick this over the 2024 Blade 14 just because of that display. You've got a really nice and efficient CPU that gives you about 7 or 8 hours of battery life. It's Intel for people that need like Intel CPUs for quick sync and video editing. It can run almost the full speed that this chip can get. Hitting about 75 watts out of a 14-inch laptop is pretty crazy for a CPU. The Omen software is not bad at all. It does push you for like ads and stuff like that, but you get a lot of control. You get a lot of fan control, some wattage control. So, I mean, it's nice to see. You got pretty decently quiet fans, not the quietest, but not bad at all. You can control those pretty well with the software. So as far as 14-inch laptops go, I mean, this is a really portable one and it gives you enough gaming performance. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere near like a G14 or Blade 14 or like the Acer 14-inch laptops or any of those, but you can get closer with the VBIOS swap, which I mentioned in the GPU section of this video. Again, I don't know why they ship this GPU with 65 watts when it's capable of a lot more with a lot of thermal headroom. Like, there's a ton of thermal headroom on this laptop. So I do feel like it should have come with 90 watts. And I really hope the 2025 model has more wattage on that GPU because that is going to be the key to get this thing competitive with other 14-inch laptops out there. Otherwise, it kind of lags behind unless you find it on a really good deal. But again, if you're willing to do that VBIOS swap, then by all means, I mean, this is pretty much right up there with the others. So yeah, I would say like this is almost a home run from HP. I mean, I'm just really happy to see them going this direction. And I truly can't wait for the 2025 model to see what they're cooking because the Omen Max 16 already looks amazing. It's basically like a 16-inch version of this with even better thermals and an insane amount of wattage output. So I'm really excited to see what they do this year in 2025. With Transcend 14, we'll see what they do there. Hopefully, like I said, more wattage. HP, if you're watching, really good job and keep it up. Seriously. But yeah, anyways, guys, I just thought this laptop was really interesting, so I thought I'd review it. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this laptop, what you're expecting in 2025 for this. And again, make sure you're subscribed because I have a lot of 2025 laptop reviews on the way, like the Flow Z13 right here. So make sure you're subscribed for that one. This thing is a monster as well. So until next time, I will catch you guys later.